To our second speaker of this morning, Mohamed Maslouh, who has an MA in Arabic Studies and Middle Eastern History from the AUC in Cairo and is currently pursuing a PhD at Ghent University on Mongol Mamluk political relations and diplomatic discourse. But that's not what he's going to talk about. He's going to give a paper entitled "What is the Church and Who are the Copts? The Coptic Patriarch's Definition of the Church Authority and Organization of its Relations with the State in the late 15th century."
Okay. Thanks first for Howard for organizing the panel, and thanks for the organizers. I'm going to change a little bit from what I'm going to discuss from the title. I was planning first to discuss how the Coptic Church organized its relation with the Copts itself, but I will not add much to what Tamir Lacey did, so I will move to study the relation of the Coptic Church with other Western churches and with the Mamluk authorities. So my paper will examine the effort of the Coptic Patriarch Yohanna XIII, who reigned from 1484 to 1524 to renegotiate and define the Coptic Church's authority vis-à-vis Western churches and local political actors in the new socio-political structure of Mamluk Sultanate in the late 15th and early 16th century. My paper will rely on the unpublished collection of letters مكاتبات يوحنا الثالث عشر. I actually acquired the manuscript from Dr. Magdi Kyrgyz, so I have to thank him for this and for the long discussions of the manuscript, which made my paper possible. This manuscript was previously examined in Tamir Lacey's dissertation, Coptic Culture and Conversion in Medieval Cairo. As Lacey and Magdi Kyrgyz note, this manuscript is quite important, rare, and sorry, can't really organize it. Okay, anyway. This manuscript is quite important, rare, and surprisingly understudied. However, depending on such historical document, usually comes with a high price, that is, it reflects an institutional perspective of the events they discuss. These letters, I perceive these letters that it should be discussed as means of communication, literary text, and normative work. So, and what I'm trying to do here is trying to draw an actual image of what is the socio-political context they discussed, not the image that the Patriarch trying to convey. So, anyway, Yohanna reigned in a critical time of Coptic history in the sense of it was in the century which witnessed what Tamir Lacey regarded as a major and perhaps the final conversion wave of the Coptic community. The disintegration of the old patronage ties with the conversion of the Coptic elites, the mass destruction of the Coptic churches, and the Black Death. He also reigned during a critical time in Mamluk Sultanate's history, as he witnessed the fall of the Mamluk Sultanate and the Ottoman conquest of Egypt. More importantly, he reigned during the late 15th century, which is now we appreciate more as a time of transformation in Mamluk history. So Mukatabat Yohanna addressed most of these challenges, and his innovative arguments were previously noted by Lacey, who argued that Yohanna conducted significant changes in Coptic familial laws to accommodate the demographic crisis which faced the Coptic community and cultural conversion of the Copts, who had adopted Muslim familial practices like polygamy and having concubines. My paper will argue that these changes in Coptic family law were just one part in all-encompassing approach to define the relation between the Coptic Church on the one hand and the Coptic community, Mamluk authority, and other Christian churches on the other. My start point will be a letter he sent to the Abyssinian king, asking him to allow a certain Muslim merchant called Khalil al-Halabi to return to Cairo with the full price of his merchandise money, which according to the letter has been stolen by Adam al-Nusrani al-Habashi, the chief merchant of the city of Musawa in Ethiopia now, or Eritrea now. Khalil al-Halabi was actually trading by the money of Naib Katib al-Sirr al-Khawja Shamsuddin al-Hulaybi. This, of course, explains why the incident gained the attention of the Mamluk Sultan and hence the attention of the Patriarch. So the Patriarch sent a letter to the Ethiopian king asking him to return the money back with Khalil al-Halabi if he's still alive, and or return the money with the messenger who is bringing him the letter if Khalil al-Halabi died. The Patriarch letter clearly reflects the fuzzy relation of the Coptic Church with both the Ethiopian king and Mamluk authorities at the time. For instance, Yohanna sent al-Anba Yaqub, the Bishop of Jerusalem, also with the messenger of al-Khawaja Shamsuddin al-Hulaybi, to mediate to the Abyssinian king to return the money. At this point, I thought probably the Patriarch was trying to use the holiness of Anba Yaqub's position as the Bishop of Jerusalem to convince the king to obey him, and at the same time, Anba Yaqub might have discussed with the king how they can restore the Ethiopian churches in Jerusalem, since it was, according to the letter, it was pretty destructive, in bad shape at the time. Actually, the bad condition of Ethiopian churches was Yohanna's main point in the second letter which he sent to the king, in addition to asking the king to let Anba Yaqub return. So it was quite weird that the Ethiopian king are collecting messengers. I didn't really figure out why he didn't let Anba Yaqub return anyway. Furthermore, the uncertainty in the language of the Patriarch in the letter to the king, that the king would even reply to his letter, was quite noticeable, I believe. At one part, he sounded like he's begging the king to obey him. He wasn't sure at all. Great. He wasn't sure at all that the king will listen to him. So just he said to him: ونحن نؤكد على محله الأقدس في ذلك غاية التأكيد فيعلم ذلك ويعتمده بغير تأخير ولا إهمال ولا تهاون ولا تسويف ويعمل الطاعة في ذلك جميعه لأجل الله فلأجل الله تعالى لا يخيب أملنا في محله الشريف. So he continues in very uncertain language. On the other hand, the letter also betrayed the peculiar relation between the Coptic Church and Mamluk authorities. The Patriarch, for example, stressed in both of his letters that he didn't send an oral message with the messengers, and that his letter do not carry any hidden messages. As well, he continued, and he specified how many lines the letter contain, and it must be taken at face value. We don't mean to send any hidden messages. We didn't write anything on the margins, so it was really he was really trying to absolve himself from any possible accusation from the Mamluk authorities. This is actually understandable given the centuries-old restriction on the Coptic Patriarch prohibiting them from communicating directly with Ethiopian king, which was often imposed by different Mamluk sultans and even during the era of Al-Hakim Ba'amrillah, the Fatimid ruler as well. However, it seems that it was strictly imposed after the incident in which Sultan al-Zahir Jaqmaq, who reigned from 1438 to 1453, imprisoned and tortured Yohanna Thalith Ashar. He ruled like 20 years before Yohanna Thalith Ashar. After accusing the Patriarch of causing a serious diplomatic conflict by informing the Ethiopian king that the church of Al-Makhtas was burned down. So the church of the Makhtas was regularly visited by Ethiopian pilgrims who were in their way to Jerusalem, so it was quite important for Ethiopians, and this caused serious conflict with the king, who also the Ethiopian king at the time presented himself as the new Constantine, the protector of Christianity, so it was quite a problem at the time. Anyway, those two letters show that it was clearly important to the Patriarch that his intervention succeeds, but unlike many of his predecessors, his life and the fate of the Coptic church were not threatened, so he would intervene. And unlike many examples that when sultans threatened the Coptic Patriarch that you have to send the Ethiopian or killed, imprisoned, make huge taxes on them. So why the life of the Patriarch was not threatened? For one, the Mamluks were fully aware about the rift between the Coptic church and the Abyssinian kings. The Ethiopians even asked the Mamluks' arch enemies at the wake of the 16th century to the Portuguese to appoint a pope to the Ethiopian church, and the Portuguese actually did so, and they called him the Patriarch of Alexandria. So they even gave him the name of the Coptic Patriarch. So the Mamluks were fully aware about this, and so they didn't really try to pressure the Coptic Patriarch to intervene in here. So I'm arguing that the Patriarch was promoting himself and the church consequently as an active player in the mediation policies, which was quite spread, especially during the late Mamluk period. In Ibn al-Sayyid Rafi's history, for example, almost every incident where the Sultan or an administrator ordered to punish someone, Ibn al-Sayyid Rafi starts narrating the mediation efforts to abolish or ease this punishment. Yohanna also showed, the letters show why having this power to intervene was quite important to Yohanna, and since the incarceration of the Copts were very common theme in the letters. So at one point he sent a blessing to incarcerated Copt, or freed from incarceration. At another incident, he used the theme of incarceration to explain theological arguments. One of them is really interesting, that he says he compared the mediation of Copts to the Mamluk authorities with the mediation of the church to the deceased Copts. So he tried to make this analogy. So he said, this is mediation to the deceased Copt is like the situation of those who are alive and they have incarcerated relatives which they care about them. They keep asking the judges and the rulers to release them all the time, and they intervene for them, and they seek the help of other people to intervene for them. And they throw themselves on the Sultan's entourage without and they throw themselves on the Sultan's entourage to make them intervene for the incarcerated Copts. More evidently, as Tamir al-Laisi notes, the church's affair was significantly influenced by the power of the wealthy archons and the Mamluk authorities. In one of Yohanna's letters, he advised the superiors of congregations to excommunicate the deacons or priests who preached the laws, and if and this is really important, if excommunication is not possible because of the intervention of the archons or the sultan, they should excommunicate them in secret before the altar and let God punish them in this life or the afterlife. So if you can't really excommunicate a priest, just in the church, pronounce it and without letting him know, and let God punish him, because in the intervention of the archons was quite influential at that time. At this moment, I will return to why Anba Yaqub was sent. So in the letter of ordination of Anba, I was tracing the significance of sending the Bishop of Jerusalem, Anba Yaqub, to the Ethiopian king as a messenger, and I found that the Patriarch was also addressing an international crisis, so to speak, which faces the Coptic Church, that led the Patriarch to make more profound changes to the Church's prerogative and perceived limits of its authority. This era witnessed many endeavors of the Latin Church to unite with the Eastern ones, which started during the reign of John XI. For example, after an exchange of letters between John XI and the Pope of Rome, Eugene XV, the Coptic Patriarch sent a monk from the monastery of St. Anthony to represent him in the Council of Florence, where the unite of the Eastern and Western churches was declared. Interestingly enough, Mark Swanson points out that the Latins, and here I'm quoting, the Latins understood it as a union under the Roman pontiff, while the Copts did not understand it as more than a union of love. End of quote. So, thus, due to this confusion, it is possible that the Ethiopian king, who himself was in contact with Rome, did not just ask the Latin Church to appoint a patriarch because of the practical difficulties to communicate with the Egyptian patriarch. It's possible that the king also understood the union between the churches implies that this prerogative now is given to the Latin Church. Johann XIII, however, tried to resolve this confusion by maintaining the policies of John XI, but expressing this new perception of inter-churches relation in a clearer words. So in his ordination letter of Anba Yaqub, the Bishop of Jerusalem, Johanna, after giving him his blessings, moved to explain that, quote, the old customs dictate that there are 4 patriarchs of Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, and Ephesus, which has moved to Constantinople, and that Jerusalem is an autonomous congregation which is not under the control of any patriarch. And it is stated in the canon that the Bishop of Jerusalem should sit right after the 4 patriarchs, and that he should not be subordinate to any of them, because if the Holy Spirit, by its wisdom, knew that all believers from all ethnicities and who speak various languages will live in Jerusalem. Thus, it's necessary that the Romans do not hate the Copts or the Copts hate the Syriacs. It's well known that the Patriarch's supremacy is not over the lands or buildings, but it's over the people of intellect who inhabit them. And this is well known for all of the patriarchs since the time when the church is separated, because Christ will judge those patriarchs on how they lead their people, not the followers of the other churches. Every patriarch should lead and manage his people well wherever they are, and appoint a leader for them and from them, so he would understand their language and know their customs which they inherited from their predecessors. So, as Dr. Magdi Gerges notes, this is quite unique and unprecedented statement, as the Coptic Patriarch first accepted the Chalcedonian churches, Western churches, authority, and even presented the church's separation as practical arrangement accepted by God and has its roots from the Apostles' era, not as a result of theological disagreement. So just comparing the ideas in this letter to the official name used to describe the church, that is Al-Kanisa, Al-Wahida, Al-Wahida, Al-Muqaddasa, Al-Jami'a, Al-Rasuliyya, the one and only church. Al-Jami'a, and here Al-Jami'a means that includes all ethnicities. So the ideas in the letter goes against all of this title. So perhaps, okay, what is important for us in here, and perhaps this is where I am going to end my presentation and draw my conclusions, that now we can see how the Patriarch's letters to the king of Ethiopia and his letters of ordination of Anba Yaqub are linked to each other. For instance, it was necessary to stress the autonomous nature of the Bishop of Jerusalem before sending him as a messenger, since the position of the Patriarch of Alexandria in itself was contested. Also, Yohanna had to highlight the de facto separation of Christian churches as an old custom, which has to be respected since it's originated from the time of the apostles, and since it's actually practical, as it is based on the deeper understanding of each church to its followers, who are supposedly share the same language and customs. Also, significantly, these letters are products of both local and international conflicts. Like Amina al-Bindari in her work Crowds and Sultans argued against the notion that 15th century Cairo was an era of decadence, and showed that many social groups and political actors in late Mamluk period negotiated their position in the society and gained significant political and social capitals through many means, and specifically protest. But the Coptic Church, on the other hand, did not have this luxury of organizing protest. So it was rather through proving usefulness and accepting or pretending to accept the Archons and Mamluks in authorities' interventions, political capital was accumulated for them. So, thanks.